There was an incident in the Strait of Hormuz that suddenly changed the game, and its impact was not only on Iran, but also on China.
Donald Trump has announced that US Marines have taken custody of a ship that attempted to breach the US naval blockade. Today, an Iranian-flagged cargo ship named Tushka, weighing almost as much as an aircraft carrier, tried to get past our naval blockade, and it did not go well for them.
China has long believed that even with tensions, Iran can control the strait so that the supply route remains uninterrupted. It's like a system that can't easily be broken, but an operation by the United States Navy shattered that assumption. On April 19th, a cargo ship from China bound for Iran was intercepted, and it wasn't just stopped. They seized the entire ship, including the crew and the captain. Out at sea, a warning was heard. Motor vessel, vacate your engine room or we will disable your ship. This was not a simple warning. This was a clear ultimatum. But before we begin, don't forget to like this video. It means a lot to us content creators. Thank you very much, and now let's get started. This ship, the MV Tushka, came from Zhuhai in southern China, and it is taking a route of over 6,000 kilometers to Bandar Abbas. According to the United States Central Command, they gave warnings for 6 hours, but the ship refused to stop. So the USS Spruance took the next step. They fired at the engine room to stop it. Afterwards, from the USS Tripoli, the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit deployed by helicopter, they directly took over the ship. And this is where the most crucial detail came out. This wasn't just a simple oil tanker. It wasn't carrying food either. According to the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post, the cargo possibly consisted of materials used in making ballistic missiles. China did not directly admit this. Iran didn't accept it either. But in one operation, it was as if a secret route was uncovered, a network that has long been operating behind the scenes. For China, this isn't just about a missing ship. This is a clear message. No matter how far the route is, from China to the Middle East, the U.S. can control the flow. And for Iran, their movements are becoming more limited because even the supply lines they rely on are being cut off one by one. Overall, this isn't just a raid, this is a turning point. An event that showed control over Hormuz is not held by just one country. And in the coming days, its effects could possibly get even worse. Not just for Iran and China, but for the whole world. It turns out that more than one ship was involved. According to reports, there were other ships from the same network that previously delivered around 1,000 tons of missile-related materials from China to Iran last year. So the question now is, what exactly is inside the MV Tushka for now? The United States Central Command has not yet released an official cargo manifest. But according to experts, the risk this ship took was not a trivial one. If they chose to go through the blockade, it's likely they were carrying something important. Some of the possible contents mentioned are sodium perchlorate, electronic components, and metal pipes. In simple terms, these are materials that can be used to make missiles or explosives. And it seems this was even confirmed by Donald Trump's statement. According to him, we stopped a ship yesterday that had some things on it. Maybe a gift from China. He may not have said directly what was inside, but it's clear that the ship was carrying something serious. And if the U.S. analysis proves this to be true, it will have a huge impact, not just on Iran, but also on China. Because in an instant, Xi Jinping could be put in a difficult position, as if it's being suggested that an agreement or trust has been violated. And the situation became even more sensitive because this wasn't said in a closed-door discussion, but in front of the media. A public point of emphasis. China was quick to respond. Their foreign ministry immediately answered. According to them, they had nothing to do with the ship. They said it wasn't a Chinese-flagged vessel, and they called the accusation speculation. But there's one interesting detail. According to Anadolu Agency, China also expressed concern about what the U.S. did. This means they sent two messages at the same time. First, we are not involved. Second, we are not comfortable with what you did. And that's where the tension deepens. If they have nothing to do with it, why are they concerned? And if they are concerned, what is the connection? At this point, the story isn't over yet. But clearly, this one ship has opened up a bigger issue that could change the relationship between the world's most powerful countries. Now, China is in a difficult position. On one hand, Xi Jinping told Mohammed bin Salman that the Hormuz should remain open as an international waterway. That means it's like they're not supporting Iran's control of the strait. But on the other hand, there's a shipping connection. This points back to China, which was caught carrying possible missile materials to Iran. Two positions that don't match. They're saying to keep the strait open. But it seems they're also helping supply weapons while it's closed. And now Beijing's room to maneuver is limited. If they deny it, they're already doing it now. But if strong evidence comes out, their credibility will be damaged. But if they admit it, Donald Trump's leverage will become stronger, and Chinese allies might be hit with sanctions. In other words, it's not just Iran that's under pressure, but also China. They're gradually getting into a more complicated situation. What the United States is doing now isn't just a simple military move, it's a strategy. They're not revealing all the information right away. They might release the results of the cargo analysis at the right time to use as leverage in their talks with China. So when Donald Trump said that this is how war works, he also meant that this is how trade and negotiation work. Pressure coming from different directions. Meanwhile, Iran called the operation piracy and threatened retaliation. But if you look at the situation, their ability to retaliate is gradually weakening. They are surrounded by 3 carrier strike groups. They don't control the Strait of Hormuz, and their oil exports are almost zero. That means as time goes by, their options are getting fewer. In fact, their own ship tried to break through the blockade, but they failed. A 6-hour warning was given. They didn't stop, and it ended up with a shot fired at the engine room, a clear sign of how serious the situation is. Now, if it can be proven that the ship was carrying missile-related materials, this will have a big impact on Iran's military capability. Missiles like the Shahab and Imad have a range from Riyadh to Tel Aviv. But if they lose the supply of critical materials like sodium perchlorate, they will be forced to stop production. And that's not the only problem. The impact on intelligence is even deeper. With a simple cargo scan, the U.S. can get the full picture of Iran's supply network. Who are the suppliers? How does the money move? What is the structure of the shell companies? In other words, they didn't just stop a single shipment. It's like they unlocked the entire system. According to Nikki Haley, the ship was allegedly connected to the shipment of chemical materials for missiles. And for her, this is a sign that China is helping to strengthen Iran. If this logistics network is destroyed, it won't be easily rebuilt. It will take months. And even if it is rebuilt, every move will be monitored. And its effects are not only felt in the Middle East, it affects the global balance of power. With just one ship, the calculations already change. Of countries across 3 continents, this is now the deeper part of the struggle. It's not just a military matter, but a geostrategic game where every move has a domino effect around the world. What the United States did in the Strait of Hormuz was not just a simple operation. It was a demonstration of broader control over the sea. From the Indo-Pacific to the Middle East, it's as if the U.S. is showing that they can reach any route. And the message to China is clear. If they can stop a ship in Hormuz, they can also do it in the Taiwan Strait or in the South China Sea. It's not just about targeting Iran, but also China's global supply routes. The line from Zhuhai to Bandar Abbas has proven to be within the U.S.'s reach. And if there's already a precedent, this could happen again in other critical choke points like Scarborough Shoal, Bashi Channel, and the Strait of Malacca. In other words, the U.S. Navy is showing that they can stop any threat, anywhere, if they want to. And this time, China couldn't do anything to stop it. If the flow of cheap oil that China buys from Iran is cut off, Beijing's energy security will be directly affected. And not only that, it also affects China's bigger plan, expanding the use of the yuan in global trade. Because if they can't protect their own trade routes, It will be hard for them to convince the world to use the yuan. As the dominance of the US dollar grows stronger, the position of the yuan as an alternative becomes weaker. Meanwhile, the so-called axis of Russia, China, and Iran doesn't seem as solid as people think. Yes, Russia supports Iran. Sergei Lavrov criticizes the U.S. blockade and defends Iran's nuclear rights. But on the other hand, he also gave a different message. According to Sergei Lavrov, Russia is ready to provide energy to countries that will be affected by the crisis. This means they are ready to fill the oil market gap left by Iran. In simple terms, while they support Iran in words, they benefit from its absence in the market. And that's where you see the reality. This is not a solid alliance. It's a partnership with each having their own interests. And seizing a single ship is enough to show the cracks between these countries. Iran's support system is slowly being cut off. Russia, even though it's said to be an ally, actually benefits more from Iran's weakness because they're the ones filling the gap in the oil supply. Meanwhile, China values the security of their own ships more than actually defending Iran. This means that the so-called axis of these three countries isn't as strong as many people think. And clearly, the United States knows this and is using it. Meanwhile, there are countries that seem to be benefiting from what's happening. For Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, the weakening of Iran's missile capability is a direct increase in security. Cities like Riyadh and Abu Dhabi, which were previously within the range of Shahab and Imad missiles, are now becoming safer. It's the same for Israel, especially in Tel Aviv. Every weakening of Iran's missile program increases Israel's strategic advantage. And beyond that, the Gulf states see that U.S. support is not just words, but concrete action. Ships are being stopped, cargo is being seized, and supply chains are being disrupted. But this doesn't mean the fight is over, because even if Iran is weakening in conventional ways, it can still use an asymmetric strategy. Groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon, militias in Iraq, and the Houthis in Yemen, they can retaliate in unexpected ways. And this is where the situation becomes dangerous, because this kind of fight doesn't end with a simple win or loss. While this is happening, international law is also being tested. The U.S. explains their actions as part of freedom of navigation and the enforcement of sanctions. In their view, stopping and seizing the ship is legal because it falls under a blockade. But for Iran, this is clearly piracy on the open seas, and they are threatening retaliation. The problem is, there are international rules like the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea that make this kind of action complicated. Both the U.S. and Iran signed it, but they never fully ratified it. That's why the legality is in a gray area. Meanwhile, I expect China to oppose this kind of move at the United Nations or in other international forums. But they're also having a hard time, because if they oppose it, they're protecting Iran. But if they support open sea lanes, they're protecting their own ships, two positions that are in conflict. And while the analysis of the seized cargo continues in U.S. laboratories, its impact could possibly grow even bigger. If it's proven to have a connection to missile materials, it could result in broader sanctions. Companies connected to China could be targeted, and this opens a new front, not just in the military, but also in the trade war between the U.S. and China. Along with this, Iran's entire supply network will be further exposed. And if that happens, it's not just one shipment that's lost, but the whole system will be revealed. The bigger question now is not just what's inside the ship, but what has been exposed because of this. Which countries are being used as middlemen? Which companies are just fronts? Which ports are being used for covert transfers? Once those questions are answered, it's not just one shipment that will be affected, but the entire supply system. And this is the bigger impact on the negotiations. While talks are ongoing in Islamabad, it's as if the United States has a new card to play. They uncovered a secret while talks were ongoing. This is where trust starts to break down. And in this situation, when trust is lost, a real agreement becomes almost impossible. According to Donald Trump, it's unlikely that the ceasefire can still be extended. J.D. Vance is on his way to Islamabad. But until now, it's still not certain if Iran will join the talks. And even if a deal is made, there is one thing that will never go away. The U.S. already knows what Iran is doing behind the ceasefire, and that knowledge will stay with them. This means the U.S.'s bargaining power has become stronger. And this won't just disappear even after the negotiations end. Now, there's another important question. If they're this strong, why didn't China retaliate right away? Why does their reaction seem limited? To understand this, the root of China's concern is energy. The Strait of Hormuz is like the lifeline of their economy. A large portion of the oil supply that powers their industry passes through here. It is estimated that between 35% to 50% of China's total crude oil passes through this strait. And if you think about it, this isn't just simple news. China is the biggest buyer of oil passing through Hormuz. They account for almost 37.7% of the total oil that passes through here. That's far ahead of other countries like India and Japan. But it's not just oil that's at stake here. China's major investments and long-term strategy in the Middle East are also involved. Countries like Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and Kuwait. They're not just oil suppliers for China. They're partners in business, infrastructure, and the future expansion of their economy. So when something happens in Hormuz, it's not just the supply that's affected. Even China's entire plan for the region is shaken. If you look at the numbers, it becomes even clearer why the situation is so sensitive for China. Almost 42% of their crude oil imports come directly from Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and Kuwait. This is not a small portion. This is what drives the entire industrial machine of China. In the UAE alone, their trade volume has already exceeded $90 billion. And this is not just a simple oil trade. China has deep investments in the region. In ports, automation systems, and even telecommunications infrastructure. For example, at Khalifa Port, a Chinese company has a major terminal investment. In Saudi Arabia, they have a tech partnership in Neom, a futuristic city project that symbolizes the country's long-term plans. In Iraq, there are Chinese companies directly involved in the oil fields. When you put all of these together, it amounts to hundreds of billions of dollars in investment. That's why every missile that Iran launches in the Gulf is not just a regional issue. It directly hits China in the pocketbook. This is where Beijing's real frustration comes from. While the Strait of Hormuz is closed, the pressure on Iraq keeps rising. Their economy is at stake. For now, China still has a bit of a buffer. They have a strategic oil reserve of about 1.39 billion barrels, which can last for roughly 120 days. Aside from this, there are also tankers at sea that serve as floating storage. To protect the local market, they even banned the export of refined fuel. So in the short term, they can still manage the situation, but not for the long term. After 3 months, supplies will gradually run out, and that's when the real problem will begin. It's possible that the price of oil could rise between $100 to $150. If that happens, inflation will follow, logistics costs will rise, and they could possibly double. And China's export-driven economy will suddenly slow down. Factories might run out of fuel. Container costs will rise, and global supply chains could start to break down one by one. In other words, it's not just Iran that's under pressure. If this continues, even China will be forced to make tough decisions. Inside Shandong, there are hundreds of small refineries, independent plants that rely on cheap oil from Iran. These are called teapot refineries. They're not big companies, but they make up almost 1/4 of China's total refining capacity. This means they play a big role in the energy system. Now think about it. If the flow of cheap Iranian oil stops, they'll be forced to buy from the global market, which is more expensive. And when that happens, their profit will drop until it becomes negative. If these refineries completely go bankrupt, China will not only face an energy crisis, but also an employment crisis. Because thousands of jobs are at stake, and the problem doesn't end here. The Chinese economy had already slowed down even before this. GDP growth has already dropped below 5%. If it gets hit by an energy shock, it will fall even further. That's why Beijing's call for a ceasefire and dialogue isn't just because they want peace, it's because of fear of an impending economic crisis. Honestly, they're not trying to save Iran. What they're protecting is their own economy. And if it comes to the point where they have to choose, it's clear which one they'll pick. Now, while the Strait of Hormuz is closed, China is looking for other ways to get supplies. The first option is pipelines from Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. For example, Saudi Arabia's petroleum pipeline to the Red Sea has already been expanded to a capacity of 7 million barrels per day. Meanwhile, the UAE's pipeline to Fujairah has a capacity of about 1.5 to 1.8 million barrels. This is a big help, but it's not enough to be comfortable. And there's another problem. The Red Sea route is under threat from the Houthis. The second option is pipelines from Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan, but their capacity is limited, and it can't be increased right away. It will take years of infrastructure expansion. The third option is to import oil from distant countries like Nigeria, Angola, and Brazil. But this brings a new problem. The journey is longer, the costs are higher, and they can't match the volume coming from Hormuz. Overall, China has alternatives, but all of them have limitations. And as the crisis drags on, the reality becomes clearer. There is no easy replacement for Hormuz. And if it doesn't reopen, it's not just Iran that will suffer. Even China. They will gradually run out of options. If a tanker doesn't pass through the Strait of Hormuz and goes through the Cape of Good Hope instead, the journey increases by about 50,000 kilometers. That's 15 to 20 days. This isn't just a simple delay, it's a logistical nightmare. Longer time at sea means higher fuel costs and slower supply. And as the journey takes longer, the pressure on the entire supply chain increases even more. Another option for China is LNG substitution. But there's also a problem here. Qatar, one of the world's largest LNG exporters, also ships its LNG through Hormuz. And because of the crisis, its flow is also affected. Or they could get LNG from Australia and the United States, but this is where the complication comes in. If China buys LNG from the US, it's like they're contradicting their alignment with Iran, a country that is currently an enemy of the US. This means that every energy option comes with political and diplomatic consequences. As China tries to fix their energy supply, they get even more caught up in their own geopolitical contradictions. While all of this is happening, the MV Tuska is already in the hands of the US. Every container is being inspected, and the evidence that can be obtained from here isn't just a temporary advantage, it's permanent leverage for the US against Iran and China. Because what was caught here is not just a ship, but a system. A supply network that has been operating for almost 40 years has been exposed. At the same time, Iran's strategy for a ceasefire collapsed. The ties between Russia, China, and Iran weakened. And once again, the extent of the United States' power at sea was proven. From Hormuz to the South China Sea, to the Red Sea, to the Taiwan Strait. A clear message. They can stop any ship anywhere. And this time, China couldn't do anything to stop it. It's like Donald Trump is telling Xi Jinping, I caught you, don't try it again. And the deeper meaning of this is that it's not just about war, but about how the global order works and who controls it. Now, a more serious question remains. How will China respond? Can Iran rebuild their supply network? And when the full results of the cargo analysis come out, what else will be revealed? To answer directly, this is not yet the point of no return. But clearly the tension is rising and more is being revealed. The relationship between the United States and China will become more dangerous. Here's the thing. The seizure of the MV Tuska is not just a simple maritime incident. It's a signal. The U.S. is showing that they can control critical trade routes even if it involves China. But even though this move is this serious, it's not yet a total breakdown of relations. Why? Because both countries have their own limitations. The United States is powerful, but it comes with costs. China, on the other hand, is angry, but also limited because of trade and energy. So what's happening now isn't a break, but a pressure phase. It's like a chess game. The U.S. is using the situation to strengthen its position in negotiations. China is accepting the effects while looking for ways not to lose its long-term advantage. But there's one thing that has changed. Trust between the two sides has eroded further. And that's the most dangerous part, because when trust is gone, even a small incident can quickly escalate. If you ask, is this the point of no return? Not yet. But it's a big step towards it if the next move isn't handled properly. A better question now is not whether it's over, but who will be the first to ease the tension and who will make the situation worse.